When was the first or the last time that you ever got spat in or got into a fight? Well, in jail. That's not always something that you can avoid. The real challenge isn't what happens, it's how you respond when it does happen. So, welcome to Stamped and Signed Stories. My name is Rena, and today I'm going to walk you through a series of assaults that have happened in a New York prison and then connect them to what it actually feels like working in that environment. The most recent assault story I read was from Corrections One, website that anybody can go to, and it is titled 8 Corrections Officers Injured During String of Assaults Disturbances at NY Prison. And this article, I'm not going to go word for word, I'm just going to pretty much give a quick synopsis of it. It was written by Carl Newton. So this story actually takes place in Dannemora, New York, at the Clinton Correctional Facility. And I do apologize if I pronounce that incorrectly. I'm from the West Coast in Idaho. I have no idea how to pronounce a lot of the New York East Coast towns, unless it's pretty obvious. These assaults took place in 5 separate incidences and lasted 6 days total. So very violent, an inmate on inmate fight, and that started out in the recreational yard. And they still have rec yards because, again, this is a prison, so it's rec yards that are outside. They have basketball courts, they have a bunch of different areas. And this ended up involving 28 inmates in total. So it starts out with the first day. So when this all occurred, this happened in different days, different assaults. Some of these assaults were multiple in one day versus just day after day. So a correctional officer was making their normal checks. They noticed that an inmate was stumbling a little bit with their feet. They looked intoxicated, and he wasn't really exactly sure what was going on. So the officer tried to get the inmate back in his cell because, honestly, you have to look out for their safety, and it could go bad very quickly if you do have an intoxicated inmate just out walking around in the cell block. They could hurt other people, different things like that can go on. So it got bad, but when he tried to get him into the cell. So the inmate took hold of the prison bars and he refused to let go. So the officers worked hard to get the inmate to let go of the bars. Then all of a sudden the inmate let go and started to attack the officers with elbows, throwing punches. One of the officers was punched in the face, causing massive swelling along with knee injuries. And I'm going to conjecture here that the knee injuries are probably come from being kicked or kneed by the inmate during the whole incident. Or it could have also happened by accident. When you're working with other people in these scenarios, sometimes you end up just getting accidentally hit by one of the other officers in this. Then that same exact day, later on, another officer was escorting a medical staff while the medical staff gave out the medications to the inmates, when they noticed another possibly intoxicated inmate. So, like the first one before, while officers were trying to get the inmate help, the inmate elbowed the officer right in the face. A couple of other officers were escorting the inmate off the block when the inmate tried to headbutt one of them. Still, they were luckily taken under control, put in restraints, and taken to the infirmary to get checked out. A few days later, another officer making their rounds, walking the cell block, was blindsided by 2 intoxicated inmates. And one of the inmates was able to actually kick the officer in the face. And they ended up sustaining minor injuries to their hands and shoulders, again, during that type of a struggle. Then the violence escalated to the recreational yard. A very violent inmate-on-inmate fight took place involving 28 inmates in all. This incident took 5 chemical deployments to stop the violence. The inmates were taken to the mess hall, and one ended up spitting on an officer during that encounter. And after a search of the rec yard, they ended up finding 2 weapons that they took into evidence. And they didn't describe what these weapons are, so I'm going to, again, conjecture, assume that they were probably sharpened pieces of either metal or hygiene products or different things like that that they were able to get a hold of. And it could be really honestly anything, because you just never know how these inmates get this contraband in. The day after that, during mealtime in the mess hall, another inmate fight had broken out, and one was making stabbing motions toward another one, so they were enticing this to happen. The fight escalated so quickly, and 12 inmates were stabbing each other with different sharpened instruments, also known as shanks. And multiple rounds of pepper spray did end up calming down the fight, and the inmates were taken to get checked up at the infirmary. And then another search of the mess hall was conducted, and 2 sharpened metal pieces, a sharpened toothbrush, and a ceramic blade were found. And reading stories like this, it's one thing, but walking into a cell block by yourself with this being a possibility is totally another thing. The tension you feel when walking into a cell block with 12 or more inmates, it's hard to explain unless you've been there. Some, of course, are irritated with each other, some are irritated with the staff, and some don't really know what their future looks like. And it's a little bit different between the dynamic of a jail in a county versus an actual prison. And I'll get into that a little bit more specifically later on. When you're walking towards the back of a cell block, sometimes you're out of the view of a control officer, which are the ones who watch all the cameras and down the cell block halls and all of that. They watch the doors, they take control of everything. That is honestly when it can get really, really dicey. And you don't know if someone has it out for you, or if today's the day they just decide to act on some sort of impulse. It may not be specifically at you, it could be at just anybody, or again, the uniform in general. So circling back to the contraband, a lot of what fuels tension comes down to one thing, and that is contraband. There are random searches of cell blocks, really are the important part of maintaining the safety. And though it can be challenging, especially in larger facilities, the smaller facilities may find it easier to conduct searches with enough staff or during shift change when you actually have everybody from that previous shift and the one that is actually coming on for either the evening or the morning, depending on however your 12-hour shift goes. At a jail where I worked at, we had different teams follow a weekly rotation of cell searches, and during these searches, inmates were moved into either the recreational area or a multi-purpose room. And deputies then searched the cells, we searched the day room, shower areas, everywhere. And we also gave them games, so we would check the cards, the game boards, things like that. And then before leaving the cell, each of the inmates were physically searched and then also scanned, because we had a body scanner, before being placed in that other area or that separate area, again, just in case they decided to take something out with them while what they were hiding. To reduce problems with inmate mail, many facilities now outsource mail processing to telecommunication companies. So again, the jail I worked for, we did this, and it cuts down on a lot of things that could happen. So it really prevents contraband from entering through the mail, and it allows deputies to focus on other duties just a lot more specific to the job rather than having to look through everybody's mail, read letters, minus the legal mail, of course. That's a different thing, and I'm going to get into that. So the legal mail is handled differently. It must be opened by the inmate in front of the deputy to ensure there are no prohibited items, such as staples or pieces of string or anything like that that they can use for other means. And it may come down the line that legal digital mail will be approved. And I do like this idea for the future. It will slow down the need for extra property bins and paper that the inmates have in their cells. If you have ever seen the videos to I believe it's the Attica riot, I believe that was also, that's also in New York. If you watch that, they had ways of putting papers on fire. So obviously they were getting lighters, or they were making their own way of making fire in their cells in order to get their pieces of paper on fire and start that process. So again, it's very important to watch this stuff. And honestly, if there's a way to do it online, a lot of prisons and jails are going towards that, which again, I think is great. It could change a lot of how everything is handled from here on out. So we'll just kind of see what the future holds for us. So in my experience, again, I've been in the jail for pretty much 3 years at this point, and there have been so many changes. There's actually no published national database that clearly breaks down inmate on officer attacks by gender. And so I guess I've been pretty lucky at this point in my short career with not getting into a ton of fights or physical altercations, or really honestly yelling altercations either. But some stats that I could find suggest that male inmates are more aggressive towards staff than female inmates. There are differences, like I said before, between jails and prisons and the attacks on staff. So in county jails, often they have a much higher differential in types of inmates, or classifications is really what we call it. The attacks are often unpredictable, whereas in prisons, the inmates are there for a lot longer and the attacks are usually planned out due to gangs or institutional control. Once I was walking a cell block and everything felt pretty normal. The inmates were joking, playing cards, asking how I was doing, just the normal, typical stuff. I told them I was doing great, asked how they were, and most of them said they were doing better than earlier. I took that as them just feeding off my positive attitude, because I try very hard to keep a positive attitude because jail already is terrible to be in, so I make it my duty to make it at least a little bit better or easier on them. But at the time, what I didn't realize was that one inmate took my politeness the wrong way. I didn't even hear the comment at the time, but later I found out that this individual had said that he loved me while I was walking away from them and out the door to the next tier. My sergeant asked me about it, and I was honestly very confused. And the reason he knew about it was because another inmate in that cell block had sent in a grievance and stated that I didn't shut this individual down when this had happened. And like I said before, I had no idea this even happened. So at the moment, I felt very confused. I was taken aback. And then I went back to the cameras to actually check what I had missed. If I just was, thinking about whatever the next task was that I was more worried about, or whatever my next move was. And it does happen. I mean, I walk through a tier at times or a cell block and just kind of thinking to myself and not really paying attention at times to what may be going on or maybe being said around me. The next shift that I heard it for myself, and in that moment, what I could have done was ignore it again, brush it off, but instead I turned and clearly stated to that inmate that it was not appropriate for him to be saying anything like that, And I just left it at that and ended up walking out. As I was walking out, though, I happened to turn around and see the inmate who had actually made that grievance. And he was very thankful that I had done that, because I'm sure whatever was being said behind my back when I wasn't in there was probably way worse than me just telling him to shut it down. And he never said it again. We never had any other problems. We had mutual respect after that. Everybody had a good mood. They would still tell me jokes and different things like that, and it ended up being just fine. So in my experience, I've had to deal with the inmates making inappropriate comments, trying to manipulate me into doing things for them, or allowing them to get away with more rules than really necessary, or rules just in general. And that's something that I have learned. You don't always need to escalate the situation, but you do need to address the situation. And I've been in a few altercations since those times, and one of them ended up with me having to go to court and testify against an inmate who had spat on me and another officer. He was extremely intoxicated when he came in, something that happened multiple times before. Pretty much every time he came in, he was pretty intoxicated. And situations like that, they really do test you. Because what you want to do in the moment is react to whatever is happening. But what you have to do is stay cool and in control. Have you ever been so drunk that your friends had to take you home and all you wanted to do was fight? I mean, yeah, that happens a lot more to men than women, but sometimes it can still happen with women. Now imagine being the one trying to help that person and they turn on you. Next to the alarming issue of correctional officers leaving their posts because of unsafe working conditions, the NYSCOPBA, which is the New York State Department of Correctional Officers and Police Benevolent Association, they had sent a letter to the New York governor explaining the rise in assaults on officers and how much of an emergency it is. When you work in an environment where you could be assaulted at any moment, it really weighs on you, and it doesn't stay at work. Your family starts to feel it too. The stress, the anxiety, the buildup every time that you leave for your shift. And remember, most shifts are 12 hours long. You don't really get a break from any of the abuse, and like I said, it weighs on you. And when one inmate gets all worked up, it does not take long for others to follow. And that's why de-escalation matters so much, or really honestly just removing that one person before the entire situation spirals. So the link for the news report and the letter is going to be in the description below. So I did read the letter, and it states that there are 5 separate violent incidences that happened in 6 separate facilities. It also states that there were deaths that happened behind bars, contraband coming into the facilities by visitors and shipments. And the article that I'm going to link in is the NYSCOPBA urges government Hachul to intervene violence, deaths, contraband. And so, again, I'm not from New York, so I do apologize if I totally butchered that name. This article was written by Felix Damon, and it was actually put up on, let me find my notes here, on April 20th, and then it had been updated the next day in the afternoon sometime. Could you imagine working under these conditions as they do in New York? So much different than here in Idaho, just at least to an extent, I will say. Would you still work in an environment where you'd get punched every day? Or would you even feel safe in your job knowing that you only have a couple officers who will respond to help you if something does go wrong. So why does violence happen? I know a lot of people that are probably listening to this have never worked in a jail, or honestly, you probably haven't even seen a jail or even realized that you have driven past one before, and or you don't even know what it is. So honestly, it's mostly from boredom and uncertainty. You probably remember as a child getting in trouble, being grounded to your room. Well, this is a little bit like that, but honestly, being in jail or prison is like being grounded on steroids. There are strict schedules that you have to follow, rules, regulations, all of that stuff. And you think about it, the same people, the same stories you've heard 10 times in a row. There's really not that many books you get to choose from in the library. There's getting less and less of them every day for people tearing out pages, just ruining them from being used way too much. And then honestly, they don't help to drown out the anxiety of those people who are seriously scared for their future or don't know what's going to happen in their future. Younger inmates are usually easily manipulated by others. They tend to act out a little bit more. Anxiety about the loss of how they thought their life was going to be. I mean, think about it. In one night, you can lose your job, you lose your family, everything can be stricken from you, and you have no idea because now you are at the mercy of a judge. And these individuals, they usually act out in different ways. Again, there's a difference between male and female. So here I'm going to be speaking mostly about males just because the majority of jail inmates are men. And a lot of times this really stands out when they're hiding things. So hiding intoxicants made from water, bread, and food, could be sharpening of everyday hygiene products given to by staff, and the feeling of not knowing what the future holds takes a huge toll, and it really hits everybody differently. Could you imagine losing your job, family, like I said before, just because of one late night of drinking and driving home? How would you feel? I've seen tattooing equipment made of broken pens and staples. One time there's an inmate who cut off the sleeves of his shirt that he bought off a commissary. And when we did a cell search, we found that he had sharpened tiles from the shower floor. Why did contractors think that tile flooring in jail would be a great idea? That was back in the 80s and early 90s. I'm not really sure, but I'm going to tell you right now it's a horrible idea because it gives them a lot more options to sharpen items to either harm themselves or others. Sometimes people don't go to work every day thinking they might get attacked, but some people do. And in those environments, staying professional isn't just about being polite, it's about staying safe. So if you know someone that works in law enforcement or corrections, do take a moment to appreciate what they deal with, because there's not that many people that do. And honestly, it's a very high turnover job, and a lot of us get tired of it after working for a little while. Most people don't go. If you have a story that you want to share, or if you work in law enforcement in any capacity and really have had some of these interactions that I'm talking about, please share them with me. Also, like and subscribe to my channel because I'm going to be making more of these, and I really want to make sure that it's content that comes from not only me, but also from you. So if you want to share your story with me, please send me an email with it, and let me know too if you want me to actually share it or if you want to stay anonymous or not. So thank you so much, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.